Okay, nice to see some familiar faces. You kind of know who I am, so that's fine. So firstly, I don't know, actually, let's have a look. Hands up, anyone that's done app widgets before on Android? Huh? A few. So app widgets are different from widgets that we think about in Flutter. So on Android, we call widgets views. So there's a bit of terminology issue here. So just want to make this clear. Just want to make this clear. So they are called app widgets. They've also been called remote views, and the kind of terms are used interchangeably in quite a lot of documentation. So just be aware of that fact. And we're not talking about widgets as such in that in the way that Flutter thinks you think of widgets in Flutter. The other point that we want to explain here is that the home screen widgets are inflated by the remote process. What that actually means in this situation is that the remote process would need to run Flutter if we wanted to use Flutter widgets directly. That isn't going to happen. So we need to work our way around that. We'll get to that. The other point here is to mention is that what we're actually sending across is a series of instructions to say inflate this view from my package, and then set all these properties on all the views. So what we actually get a very set of limited widgets that we can use, like text views, image views, list views. These are all things that are in Android, not in Flutter. So again, we have to work around that. The other problem we actually have is that this is by design. All of this is by design, and it's about the fact that we need to keep security. So you don't want let's say you want to host a widget yourself. Let's say you made the home screen and you want to host this clock. You're going to have to run that clock code, right? Well, that's kind of a bit dodgy, right? You don't really want to be running someone else's code and you don't know what it does. They might be looking at your contacts or whatever else. So what they actually do is they work on a system called pending intents. I'll jump back to that in a second. So on Android, the system for communication is a one-way messaging system called intents, and it's the idea of providing a action or a command in terms of I want to do. I want to perform this action, and you hope that someone's there to receive it and to perform that action. You then have a two-way communication. In terms of you can then obviously have a filter for intents on the receiving side. So you send a message and then you can receive a message back. That's the fundamentals of intents, and I swear I'm not touching anything. However, to do with the way that we deal with this in terms of widgets is with pending intents. Pending intents are very specifically, you set up an intent to happen in the future, and then you give that pending intent a reference, and the system maintains that reference on your behalf. I'm like, what is going on? Right. So the idea here is that we want to provide the widget with a pending intent, and then later on the foreign process, be it the home screen, can then action that pending intent, and it will call back into your application and perform that code. So how do we handle these events in terms of Flutter? I swear I'm not touching anything. So widgets. We receive the intents coming from the platform, from the home screen, via a broadcast receiver. There's magic in the way you set this up. This is all very Android specific, and it's been talked about a lot, so I'm not going to go into detail. However, we do get these events that come back. So on enabled, on disabled, on update, on deleted, and I'm calling it here on app widget options changes, essentially when extra settings change. this is not my day. Should I try plugging in the other one? Should I just... Is it? Yay. Okay. Cross your fingers. And also the case is that if you want to set up custom actions, so like on click of a certain view on your widgets, then you want that to call back into your Dart code into your Flutter application. So, oh, you reckon my laptop's allergic? Yeah, okay. You never know. We have two main problems in this. We need to overcome the problem that how do we display custom Flutter widgets which are rendered by the Flutter engine in a remote process. The trick here is either to use method channels to actually write the native code yourself and still use the standard Android behavior, which kind of is cheating, but at the end of the day, it means that we can just use Android views and then have the widget behavior that we want in our Flutter apps. The other way that we can deal with this is something that I have code for, which you'll have access to tomorrow, which is the way that we capture a view. So in Flutter, we use a repaint boundary that allows us to capture part of the hierarchy in an image. And we get the bytes from that image, and we can send it across the platform channel to the native Android code. That native Android code then can ship it off to the remote widget, and the remote widget is just an image view. So it's kind of a trick in that we render the code and display for the display locally, and then we then shipping that off to the home screen, and the home screen displays our lovely Flutter widgets as if they were locally. The problem, of course, is that interaction. So you're not going to get 60 frames per second interaction. This is the same problem you're going to get with current platform widgets. But we can at least still get the same behavior that we expect from Flutter widgets on the home screen. And then the second problem is how do we execute that Dart code on the click handling. So there's actually a catch-22 in terms of the way that Dart handles, well, the Flutter engine actually starts up. We actually need it to start up in the background, but also provide us with a view system, so we can actually render those views. So there is a trick to this, and it is documented. They actually use it in the current Android Alarm Manager plugin, the package that you can all go check out. The way it works in terms of, try to keep this simple, without code, of course. When your Android application starts up, it starts up an application class, which is sort of your app delegate from the iOS terms. And what we do there is we start up the Dart subsystem. That starts up the Dart runtime in the background. And then we delay any intents that we're getting pulled in. We put them in a queue in Android. And then once the Dart system runs up, we then send that queue and action each one as callbacks in the Dart code. I will provide you with code, as I said, but the idea here is that Dart and the Flutter runtime actually provides us with the system for executing callbacks. So this is not something that I've invented. This is just something that I'm implementing and using. But we'll be able to see that code, hopefully. This is going to be a really short talk, by the way. You can find me there. That URL at the top is where you'll find this code, and I'll put that up tomorrow. And these slides will be attached to the talk today. You can find more information on these topics I've been talking about at the bottom here. I'm open to questions. Sorry. Yeah. Flip the wrong channel.
Hello. All right. Short talk after all. So, any questions for young Simon here?
Cannot you now push the code to the GitHub and open it on this laptop?
The code has some issues right now. So this is kind of a saving grace as well.
maybe you can get it running in the pub.
Maybe. Who wants to buy me some beers?
Well, Vlad wants.
Hi, Simon.
Hello.
Hello. Sounds like an issue sort of similar to cloud messaging. You know, when someone sends a message, then you open it up, and you need to go to somewhere within the app related to that message, right?
You're talking about sort of like deep linking.
Yeah, exactly.
And no, in that sense it is, right? Because we have an issue that because we have a separate subsystem, be it the Flutter engine that has to start up, we have to handle that situation where it's almost buffering, right? So we have the native operating system providing us with events, and we need to action those events, but only when our system and our app is ready. So that we have to kind of like buffer in between. Yeah.
So with with cloud messaging, the issue is always like you have to build in all of the scenarios into the app before you may even know them. When you're building it, so that the user, once the app is on the device, will go to the right page rather than like have some flexibility in terms of the right pages, right?
Yeah. I mean, in regards to this, we've only got a single set of events that we have to deal with. I wish I could bring up an example. I could actually, if anyone's... Do we have time? We have time, I guess. That's not good. Oh, God, touch. Mac. It's a touch bar. I don't even know what I'm pressing here. Exit. Oh, God. It's alive. Oh, yeah. That won't work, will it? Oh, God. Like, short. Oh, my God. Can't even type on this thing. This is futility. Oh my God. This new Mac keyboard as well. I blame it on the keyboard. Can I make that? Oh God. That's not maximize. That's a rear, isn't it? We actually have I'll open this up just I did this widget. Probably run this, I guess. I did this widget on Android a long time ago as a bet, actually. But the idea here was someone said you can't use custom fonts on a widget, and I said yes you can. So I said I'll draw them myself and put them up there as an image, and it worked. But oh my God, what am I pressing? So, see if I can make this bigger.
Use 2 fingers. Try to make it bigger. Plus.
Command plus. I'm learning. This is good. So let me take it back a drop here, and just to explain a few little things here. I might as well give you something. When you set up you have to. This is the same issue which you're going to have with any. A lot of people don't realise with Flutter that you can actually. It's an Android app, right? Anything you can do in Android, you can do in Flutter. It just so happens is what do you want to do as part of your Flutter app? What do you want to do as part of the Android code? But in this situation, we obviously have to deal with the Android system. So, oh my God, what am I doing?
2 fingers.
I'm trying. So we actually have here, this is the provider, this is the broadcast receiver, and this is the special action that the app widget manager sends. And then this links to an XML resource which describes your widget, and that tells the home screen what you it should display in terms of a preview and some other things, which I'll open up here. The worst interface for browsing code. There's a few different properties here. Originally, there's some versions of Android that let you put widgets on the keyguard. Some of the early versions, I believe they've stopped that now. Depends on the launcher you have. However, that's what you can provide a different layout for that, obviously. And then if you support resizing, then you can support the minimum and maximum sizes that you want to be able to resize to, and if you want it to resize in what direction. And then there's a category here. There's 3 categories: home screen, keyguard, and search. Search is a lot of new phones now have a little search bar at the top on the home screen, and that's a custom widget provided by Google, and you can actually make your own app and provide your own search if you want to. And then down here, update period. That's how many times it will automatically call the update function on your fire intent in that period, and that will tell your app to update the widget contents. So if you had like a stock ticker or maybe some news articles, you might want to do a day, set that to the number of milliseconds in a day, and then every 24 hours you'll get a automatic update come through. However, if you set it to 0, it means you don't want updates, and you can just forcefully update the widget whenever you want. So, and then if we go back, so we actually get the, I think it was in here. If I can find it. Nope. In this one I've kind of abstracted out what the widget actually does. So this is the abstract provider. So each one of the callbacks that we actually receive from the platform will start and stop a background service that manages the app widgets, and then I forward the intents over to the service, giving it. So we actually get this the app widget manager. That's the host system that manages the app widgets on the device. Will provide us with a series of app widget IDs. Those are generated for you. These are just integers, and the host system manages what they are. You just take them as opaque numbers and use them to identify which widget you want to update, because it might be a case that the person has 5 stock tickers all from your app on their home screen. So in which case you're going to get 5 integers in this array. The options are things like size. So if the size of the widget changes, that's the options. Another interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize, which I think I've put in this code. That's a good point, actually. Let me see if I put that in there. I believe it's in there. Yeah. So there's a little trick that's actually happening in here. This is very Android specific, written Java, I'm sorry. But what I actually do here is I get the source bounds from the intent that launched the activity, and that's actually the bounds of the widget on the home screen. So you can actually have the widget expand to full screen when you tap on it, and things like these nice effects like that. It's the same thing that happens when your app launches, and you actually get the source bounds in the intent, and the system by default transitions your screen from the icon, and you can actually take over that effect and do whatever you want. And that could all be done in Flutter as well. So we could forward over those bounds to Flutter and do some nice animation in Flutter with a transparent background. In this situation, it actually does animate up. Not sure if there's much else to go through right now, rather than bore you with Android code. Yeah, sorry. This does essentially the same thing as what I've done in the Flutter code, which is where is it? Update widget. This is actually getting the actual note widget here itself is actually a data model, and then we're verifying it has a size. If it has a size, we set up some of our layout bounds, get the data for the widget, set up the attribute, set the text color, and then create a remote views. This is the data object that we send to the remote process, which holds our structure. In this case, it's a layout, and I get the view from the image from the view, set the image bitmap. Oh, good point to mention. This is limited to 1.5 times the screen resolution. So if you try and send a bitmap that you want to scroll, which you potentially could, you won't get very far if it's a lot larger than the screen size. So the way we could overcome that is with a list view and then have each item be an image view of a Flutter view. And therefore each one is a small portion of the screen size, not totaling 1.5 times the screen resolution. That's an arbitrary number the platform developers chose. To be honest, it's a good idea because you don't really want to be shifting around 4 megabytes at a time, 4 to 6 megabytes at a time, just for like a half HD screen. I think that's about right. Yeah, and then this is setting up the pending intent that will call back into our config activity with our app ID, so that we can make sure that we're editing the right data for the right widget and updating the right widget. And that's about it, really. I'll make sure the code's posted by tomorrow evening. I've got work tomorrow, so. But yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Any questions?
Hi. So on this specific class, in line 137. No, just a question.
137.
Yeah,
Yep.
like that note widget, is that a Flutter? Not widget.view. That note
No,
widget
no.
is
So note widget is a custom model I made, which is somewhere.
okay.
There it is there. So this is transient. In other words, we don't want to serialize this, but we serialize the rest of the settings so that we can track this. I just used a serialization stream to store this. By the way, this code was written in like 2011 originally. I've only updated it. Literally, was yesterday I upgraded this to use Gradle. It was Eclipse. But yeah.
But
It's
the part that is Flutter to Android, where is that?
I haven't got that up here available at the moment.
Ah, okay. I see.
I'll post it tomorrow, and
Cool.
let me switch back to slides. It'll be at that top link there. Yeah.
I'll post it on Twitter.
I see.
We'll link to this link on the meetup as well.
Yeah.
And the slides as well.
Any further questions?
Nope.
Anybody?
Beer
No?
time.
All right then. So we have a tradition of going to the pub after this. So most people know where it is. It's inside Liverpool Street Station near the escalators. I'm going to pack up and I'll see you down there soon.